Hi, so in this installment of Ghibli Week, I'll be talking to you about Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. It's not one of the more wildly popular Ghibli films like Spirited Away or Howl's Moving Castle, which will be covered in the next installment, so look out for that. But Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is a little surreal fantasy thing with lots of giant mutated insects, giant mutated bioweapons, giant mutated flora and fauna. And that just seems like a lot of sci-fi motif for you, but actually all these have their roots in a cinematic convention which we call hibakusha cinema. So before we go into that, I will be talking about the historical context, namely the social and psychological impacts of the droppings of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So we all know that no event of the 20th century has affected Japan as much as the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima, and Nagasaki, where I think more than 200,000 people perished across both cities. And it left a lot of infrastructural damage which took decades to repair. But besides these great physical tolls, there were a lot of social and psychological impacts as well. And this bombing was conducted on an unprecedented scale that shocked the entire world. It really marked Japan's shift from a fearsome and brutal warmongering power to one that needed to rely on foreign aid to rebuild their struggling economy. So back to Nausicaa, while the film doesn't originate in the immediate post-war period where most hibakusha films were made, it still does convey the Japanese victimhood towards the atomic bombings by dramatizing and explicating the complete devastation which is wrought by nuclear weaponry. So in Nausicaa, the sort of atomic legacy that was brought about by nuclear weapons is this toxic forest called the Sea of Decay, and just complete upheavals in the natural order which see humanity struggling to survive in the face of like giant mutated insects, and you can see that its condemnation of nuclear technology is evident from the very premise, where the distortion of the natural landscape serves as a metaphor to suggest the complete corruption that nuclear weaponry brings about. And so you may be like, okay, I think plants are cool, I don't like seeing disgusting plants and we'll die. But actually, in Japanese culture, this corruption of the natural landscape itself is perhaps more significant than if you're looking at it from a Western perspective, because in Japan, where much of society believes in certain tenets of Shintoism, one of which being that nature is a divine force, nature is a life-giving force that should be respected and revered. So the entire upending of this natural landscape, from something which is beautiful and divine to something which is corrupted and death-bringing, clearly illustrates nuclear technology's utter corruption of life itself. And similarly, the main source of nuclear power in this film is something called the giant warriors. They are not presented as big majestic weapons that can obliterate entire cities in one fell swoop, but rather they are inhuman masses of red and melting flesh that kinda melt into goop and destroy things which were not supposed to be destroyed. So taken together, these images reinforce the idea that the corruption that stems from nuclear technology is all-encompassing. It's not just that the weapons themselves are bad, but that the weapons also have long-term consequences that subvert what human life is supposed to be. So, and by extension, the effects of nuclear technology that are presented position Japan as a victim of a truly devastating attack, because and Miyazaki is saying that no human life should ever be subject to such an atrocity. So that's just within the film itself, but it's also interesting to consider the wider cinematic movements, cinematic conventions that Nausicaa, the film, is situated within. So the period in which Nausicaa was produced coincided with the rise of the science fiction genre. So a lot of you may have watched films such as Akira, which also deal with the subject matter of a post-nuclear world. And the reason why science fiction had such a meteoric rise in the 1980s was because, number one, technology is great and we can have cool special effects. And number two, science fiction and the narrative fantasy that it affords allows people to suspend their disbelief and allows people to kind of euphemistically talk about events, societal traumas that cannot be talked about explicitly without evoking painful memories and perhaps taboos. So in Nausicaa's case, the literal distortion of the giant warriors is a symbol of the plight of the hibakusha, the ordinary citizens who suffered the mutative effects of radiation, the radiation poisoning back in the 1940s. All these visual cues perpetuate the larger discourse of Japanese victimhood from the atomic bombings. Yes. And beyond the initial context that Nausicaa establishes, there's also a fixation on the misuse of technology. So it is humans' misuse of nuclear technology that causes really big problems. So, for example, one of the main narrative threads in Nausicaa, where the Tomikans had seized this giant warrior embryo from Brigitte, and they want to use it to burn away the Sea of Decay. Because if you burn away the toxic forest, like, our problems will be solved, right? Right? Wrong. One of the main narrative things that was used to portray the Tomikans' carelessness was the conflict between them and the Oms. Actually, underneath their fearsome appearances, they are gentle. They only become aggressive when provoked by human hands, and hence the Tomikans driving them out of their natural habitat provokes this really large reaction that ends up endangering the lives of the entire human race. And also, the film emphasizes the cruelty that humans inflict upon animals with our use of technology. So just because we got guns, we got bombs, we very big, right? But then Miyazaki argues that this is not the case. Technological developments are not bad in themselves, but transmute themselves into vessels of evil and destruction when placed in the wrong hands. And this whole technology against nuclear weaponry is furthered through the explicit visual parallel between the giant warrior's blast and the mushroom cloud of the 1945 bombings. So, which suggests that the Tomikans' use of the giant warrior to inflict destruction are as equally atrocious to the bombings of 1945. And moreover, this visual parallel also works to frame the events in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in terms of the fictional narrative to suggest that the Tomikans had exacted cruelty and violence upon the innocent Oms, just as how Japan was an innocent victim of the Allied forces bombings. So there's all this doom and gloom, like we are killing insects, we are killing the plants, and the giant warriors like destroying all our towns. So that's very unfortunate for everyone. But Nausicaa cannot be said to present an overwhelmingly negative view of Japanese victimhood, because even as these themes of destruction pervade the film, they are firmly counterbalanced against hopeful themes of restoration and regrowth. So here we are seeing an example of Miyazaki's specific brand of pacifism, which extends beyond merely an anti-war message, but to the idea that it is important to take a forward-looking stance in response to destruction. So this is shown through how in the film, pacifism is championed by Nausicaa, who's our main character. And while other characters despise the Sea of Decay and its resident insects, Nausicaa is able to see the beauty in nature and insists upon coexistence with it. So at the very start of the film, we see Nausicaa in her hazmat protective suit, marveling at the sheer beauty of the fungal spores, the colors that are present in the landscape, even as they are toxic to human beings. And eventually it is this very love for nature, this very drive to coexist with the land that allows her to bring peace to all the warring factions and allows humanity to once again connect with the earth that is left behind, smoldering but still our home, and to truly rebuild. Yeah. So this positive attitude diverges from a lot of the conventional hibakusha films. So where conventional hibakusha cinema kind of fixates on this idea of destruction and decay, but Nausicaa suggests that it's possible for, and I have a really good quote from Deemer 2016, the triumph of pacifism in Nausicaa suggests that it is possible for Japan, and indeed the world, to escape the cycle of destruction heralded by the nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So yeah, that's about all I have for you guys. So to wrap it up, war bad, nuclear weapons bad, humanity is even worse for using nuclear weapons, but things can be good. So all you major powers out there looking at you holders of nuclear warheads, as Miyazaki says, war bad. Thank you. Okay, so that's it from me for now. I mean forever, probably. Now that we've learned about Nausicaa, we'll be going chronologically through Miyazaki's films. And the next installment will be on Howl's Moving Castle, excitement, woo! And the last one will be The Wind Rises. Yes, so keep a lookout for the next two posts, and yeah, hope you enjoy Ghibli Week.